if you have your Bibles, if you got your digital advice, if you just want to look at the screen, we're going to be looking at John chapter 9 tonight about a blind man, a man who was blind from birth. Jesus healed him. So every week we call it a worship service, we call it a kava service, we call it whatever you kind of want to call it, a gathering, an assembly. Nah, maybe not, that's a little too official, but gathering sounds better. But we do this on a weekly basis, and like Marissa said, we believe in small groups, in discipleship, and the method of Jesus and the way he did it. And so we're big on small groups, and then this is kind of like everybody gets together on Thursday night, and it's just awesome. So we love the Bible. We believe the Bible is the Word of God. It's infallible, it's authentic, and it's the truth. So we love to read from the Bible. So here we go. John chapter 9, verses 1 through 7 says this. Now, as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. Now, if you can see, thank you, Jesus, that you have eyes and you can see. Because what would it be like for you? You ever tried that? Just closing your eyes and try to walk around a room? How difficult that would be. And here's a man who is blind from birth. And it says Jesus saw him. And it says this in verse 2. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned? This man or his parents that he was born blind? In other words, whose fault was it? Was it before birth that he had already sinned? And Jesus' answer says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, and Jesus says this, I am the light of the world. And when he had said these things, he spat on the ground, made clay with saliva, okay, like mud. And he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. So he spits in the ground. You ever have your dad ever tell you, hey, just rub some dirt on it? You know, just like, hey, get up, rub some dirt on it. And here Jesus taking dirt and spit, mixes it together, and then wipes it on the guy's eyes. You got to be at this point willing to have anything happen if, you know what I'm saying, if someone does that to you. So he makes clay out of it. And he said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam. So he went and washed, and he came back seeing. Now, most of the time in Scripture, when someone wants to be healed, they're going up to Jesus asking him to heal them. But here, this man doesn't say anything. It's actually Jesus who walks up to him and then asks him, basically prays over him, spits in the ground, makes mud and clay, and wipes it on his eyes, and he's healed. And what you see here is the real compassion of Jesus, that the man didn't say anything, but he still wanted to go and minister to him. It's kind of like when some of you were moving in, and you got these randos who come running up to you, and they're like, hey, can I help you move in? And you're going, who sent you? You didn't ask for help. But you're going, yeah, I got a mini fridge, and I'm on the 4th floor, and Dad, what do you think? Yeah, we'll take the help. You know, some of you probably were like, at first you were like, I don't want help, and then you realize like, yeah, we can knock it out in one trip. And so that may have been your experience. You didn't ask for it, but people just showed up, and they're like, hey, we want to help you move in. Some of us, we didn't come to college looking for Jesus, but we came here, and he's looking for us. When I was alone in my room, I wasn't looking for God. But man, he was looking for me. And he met me in that room. And my life has never been the same since. So that's why it's God's pursuit of man. God pursues after people. Okay, so here we go. I got to hurry because Josh Mendez is going to do the second part here. So John 9:13 through 16 says this. Then they brought him who formerly was blind, so he gets healed, right? And he goes before the Pharisees, who are the religious leaders of that day. Now it was a Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also asked him again how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put clay on my eyes, I washed, and I see. Therefore some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. And they were mad. Basically, what the Pharisees did was they took the 10 Commandments, they blew it up, and they made like 300 other rules. Yeah, it's a lot. So much so that if you spit on the ground, you were doing work on the Sabbath. So the Sabbath day, the fourth commandment out of the 10 was to keep it holy. In other words, don't work. It's like a rest day, right? It'd be like our Sunday. It's kind of like a day of rest. But to them, even if you spit in the ground, you were working. So they're going, this man can't be from God. He just broke the rules. So is Jesus a rule breaker? In the Bible, he says, I didn't come to destroy the law. I came to fulfill it. So, what was going on here? People will look at Christianity with an outside perspective. They'll try to dissect it, critique it, without really experiencing it. The danger is if you stay there, then you view Christianity like a set of rules instead of a real relationship. That's why we say rules without a relationship always leads to rebellion. How else can you explain these guys who knew all the rules, yet they're standing in front of the one who made them, and they're accusing him of not being from God, as if he's not God or something. And it led them to rebellion. So when we try to just follow the rules of Christianity without really knowing who God is, what will eventually happen to us is we'll just rebel. We'll just be like, you know what, forget it. I'm going to go do something else with my life. But the 10 Commandments, see, number one, when God gave the 10 Commandments to Moses on that Mount Sinai, number one was, you shall have no other gods before me. He goes, number two, don't bow down and worship false idols. Number three, don't take the Lord's name in vain. Number four, keep the Sabbath day holy. Don't lie, don't steal, don't commit adultery, honor your father and mother, don't bear a false witness. And the last one, do not covet. You're right. And that's another one. Do not kill. There we go. Do not kill. And do not covet. So why did God give these 10 commandments? Was it about following a set of rules, or was there something behind it? The 10 commandments were given as ground rules for fellowship. God is saying, if you want to walk with me, if you want to talk with me, if you want to grow with me, if you want to love me, here's some things to abide by and follow. If you want to have fellowship with me, well, here it is. And Jesus, when he came, he condensed it into two. Love the Lord your God, he said, with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second one's like the first. Love your neighbor as yourself. So that means this, is there's actually a heart behind the law. So when you break the law, you actually break a heart, because it's God's heart for mankind. But when you just view it like a list of rules to follow, but you don't want to really know him, you'll just eventually run. And you'll get mad or confused, and you'll just rebel. But look, Christianity is not about a checklist. It's about a person. And that person is Jesus. And there's a question we like to ask all the time around here. If you want to check your motives of your heart, we always ask this question: why do you do the things you do? And who do you do them for? Why do you do the things you do? And who do you do them for? Okay, skipping down. Lastly, John 9:35. Here we go. And then Josh Mendez is going to take it over. Jesus heard that they had cast him out. So basically, there was a back and forth between the blind man who was healed and the Pharisees. And they're like, there's no way you were healed. And he's like, yes, I was. And he's like, prove it. And he's like, well, let me tell you just over again. And then the blind man that got healed says, what, do you want to be one of his disciples or something? And they get mad, and the Pharisees just throw him out, right? So he's excommunicated. Jesus heard that he had been cast out, and he says to him, do you believe in the Son of God? And the blind man who was healed answers a question with a question. Well, who is he so I can believe in him? And Jesus responds, it says, it is he who you see and who you're talking with right now. And his response is, Lord, I believe. And like we did at the beginning, it says he worshiped him. He says, Lord, I believe. And I wondered, I said, what was it about this man that made him, like, not made him, but he chose to believe so quick? You know, he's like, who is he? Tell me who he is. And he's like, you're looking at him, and Jesus is like, I'm right here standing in front of you. I'm talking to you right now. And he's going, Lord, I believe. Like that quick. What was it? Was it because something that God did? Was it something that Jesus did because he healed him? Was it just a good thing done to him that made him believe or wanted to believe? Or was it more about a realization of who he was? Not so much about what Jesus had done for him, but who he was, the person of Jesus. And he's going, I'll follow you wherever. And what happened was the love of God had come into his heart. So now you'll get to hear a personal account of one of my dear friends and brothers, Josh Mendez. So, Josh, come on up.
What's up? Ooh, that's a loud mic. I'm going to get the other stand because I'm kind of tall, so, you know. Sorry, Preston, I'm just kind of, all your iPads on there. I'm just going to take that real quick. Bear with me, please. Bear with me. All right. So I was doing a bit of yelling, too, so have me a little sparkling water, so just bear with me for a sec. Oh, that's some good stuff. All righty. So, what's up, y'all? Now y'all know a little bit about me. I'm a guy who likes sweet beverages. I'm pretty, easygoing, laid back and all that, But yeah, my name's Josh, and so basically, I grew up going to church my whole life, right? Pretty much every time the doors were open, I was there. I served in kids' church. I went to Wednesday night services. All the events, I would go to them. My parents were like, hey, Josh, get out your room. It's time to go to church. And I was like, hey, Mom, I don't really want to do that. But I had no choice. So I did my prayers. I was a good Christian boy. And what I didn't do is I never took time to get to know God, right? So to me, God was just a checkbox I could mark off every time, like, hey, I went to church, I did my thing, I'm going to go to heaven, I'm good, right? I got him as some kind of like fire insurance. So I knew how to be a good Christian, but I knew what to say, I knew when to say it, and man, I looked really good doing it. Like, people would look at me and they'd be like, man, that guy, he loves God. But what really was happening was I'd become a Pharisee. You see, I knew a lot about the book of the Lord, but I knew nothing about the Lord of the book. See, I'd become like a whitewashed tomb. I looked pretty on the outside, but on the inside I was full of decay and death. And so, just like the Pharisees, I looked really good on the outside. But when I was face to face with Jesus, I never knew what he looked like. And so, as you can probably tell, Jesus was not really the main focus of my life. Instead, I wanted to live life doing what I wanted to do. I wanted to say the things I wanted to say, hang out with the people I wanted to hang out with. And ultimately, when life started to get a little more difficult, I pretty much threw God out the window entirely. And so, instead of being a Pharisee, I'd become like a beggar. And I was seeking after the world, and I said, world, I want you to fill me. I want to get all these pleasures from you. I want more of that. I want anything that you can give me because I thought that the world could satisfy me. And so, I thought that living that way, I was like, man, I know God exists. I don't care he exists, though, right? And so, as I go on life, I figured, man, I'm seeing clearer than I ever saw before. I see all these desires. I'm filling myself with these desires, right? And the reality was I was becoming more and more blind. And so, the result of, getting everything that you want, you think, man, that's the life, that's the ideal life. But the reality was that as I kept doing what I wanted to do, I just kept getting more and more depressed, more and more sad, more and more anxious. Ultimately, my heart became so full of hate that I hated myself, I hated God, I hated people, I hated my family, and the list goes on and on and on. And eventually, all of these emotions boiled over inside of me, and I thought that the only way out was through self-harm. And so I did that for a while, and ultimately I had to decide, man, I got to go to college now. What school do I pick, right? And so I chose Texas A&M Kingsville, some small college or somewhere in some place called Kingsville, Texas, right? So I chose to go to Kingsville not because, hey, I knew what it was about, but because my grandparents lived in the area. And so, at the time, we had visited for like Thanksgiving, for Christmas, and all that stuff. So I had a lot of pretty good memories in Kingsville. So, but Houston, on the other hand, that's where I'm from H-Town, hold it down, all that. So in Houston, I didn't really have many good memories. And so inside of me, I was like, man, I want to go to Kingsville. I want to go somewhere where I can be happy, right? And a couple of weeks before I graduated high school, my parents introduced me to a guy that was in church randomly that day. His name was Drew Disney. A lot of the guys here know Drew. He's basically, Drew was a 30-year-old dude from Ohio. And I was 18 years old when I met Drew. So that's the same age gap as between me and my sister. That's 11 years. So he was the first friend I made from Kingsville. And I come to find out that Drew was part of a campus ministry called Chi Alpha, right? And at the time, I was not a very nice guy. And my parents told me, look, Josh, hey, here, come here for a second, buddy. Like, hey, that Chi Alpha, man, like, your grandpa, he's a pastor and all that. I'm like, yeah, I know he's a pastor. Yeah, it's okay, yeah. Yeah, so he'd be very happy if you went to Chi Alpha and, did that whole thing, right? And I was thinking at the time, man, what the heck are you talking about, bro? I'm not trying to be a religious freak. I don't want to do his church thing. I'm trying to do me right now, okay? And of course, I used probably a little more colorful language during that whole encounter. But throughout the summer, Drew would text me. Some of y'all are probably getting texts right now, and you're probably responding to your friends a lot better than I did. So with Drew, I pretty much ignored him, and I gave him one-word responses to all his texts. He was like, hey, man, how's it going? Leave him on red. Hey, man, I can't wait for you to get to Kingsville. How you doing? Good. Pretty much went like that for the whole summer. But even though I was trying my hardest to send the message, hey, dude, I don't want anything to do with you, he still offered to move me into my dorm. And I was like, hot dog, somebody can carry my fridge up those stairs. So what he also did, though, was he took me to Spice Station. I don't know if any of y'all been to Spice Station before. Yeah. And he paid for my meal my first time at Spice Station. And he also would offer to drive me to Walmart because as a freshman, I did not have a car to drive. So that was a real blessing, right? And whenever I was around Drew, I never felt like a bad person. I never felt like he was using me for some ulterior motive. I never felt like he was going to abandon me or anything like that. And it wasn't because Drew was a spectacular person or a good person or anything like that. But it was because Drew served a loving God. And so you see, for my entire life, I grew up in church, right? I never believed that God could be loving. In fact, I knew it intellectually in my mind. If someone said, hey, is God a God of love? I'd say, yeah, he's a God of love, man. But there's a difference between knowing something and actually believing it. And so my whole life, I saw God as a rule giver. You have to follow the rules. You have to be a good person. You can't do this thing. You can't do that thing. And just like Sean said earlier, rules without relationship always leads to rebellion. And so that's what happened to me. I rebelled against God. I hated God. I tried to run away from God. I did as much as I could to say, God, I don't want anything to do with you. But he still loved me. And he showed his love to me through Drew Disney. And so one night, I was in my dorm, and I had reached rock bottom. I was at the worst point in my life. I was alone, I was broken, and I was depressed. And all of a sudden, a thought comes into my head saying, man, Josh, is this all your life is going to amount to? And at that moment, I start to freak out because already, my life was starting to flash before my eyes like, man, I can't keep going like this. There has to be more to life than just trying to do what I want to do. And so I did the only thing I knew how to do. I picked up a Bible and I started to read it. And so, I dusted it off because I hadn't read it in quite a while, so. But one night as I was reading, I was praying to God and I said, God, I need you to speak to me because, man, I don't know what to do with my life. I need you to show me that you're actually here and that you're actually real. I need to know what the heck I need to do. And God answered me and he said, Josh, when you were younger, you would pray to me, you'd go to church, you would do the right things, but you never actually tried to get to know me. And he said, if you want that, all you have to do is seek my face and spend time with me. And so, at that moment, the mud fell from my eyes, and for the first time in my life, I could see the true image of Jesus. And so I gave my life to Jesus on January 24th, 2019. Some of y'all were probably still in high school. But I did it on the front lawn, right between the sub and the pavilion. I was 19 years old, and as I stood to accept him, all the depression, the hatred, the anxieties, everything fell off of me. And I haven't been the same since. But you see, I'm only standing here today because God chose to pursue me. I never chose God. I was running away from him. But it was God who put the desire in my heart to come to Kingsville. And there's something I didn't share about Drew. Yeah, he wasn't just a random guy coming to church that day. His in-laws were going to the same church I was going to, right? Drew's from Ohio, so just for him to get to Texas, that takes a miracle in and of itself. His in-laws live an hour away from the church I go to, and they were there. They only started going because a friend somehow managed to randomly just go to church that day and said, hey, this church is pretty cool, and let's drive an hour away. You guys come with me. Let's go to church right here. And that's just a small part of it. Like, there's just well, the point of that is just basically to say, like, God pursues you. Whether or not you see it, there's a lot of things, even right now, that God's working, and he just loves you guys so much. That's just like, But God's doing the same for each and every one of you. He's pursuing us constantly. Whether we've been in church our whole life, whether we've drifted away, whether we've never seen who he is, or even whether we don't know him at all. You're not here today by mistake. It's not a coincidence that you're here, whether it's your first time being here or your 100th time being here. Because his message to you is the same. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And I guarantee that when you walk in his love, you'll be like the once blind man who will say to the world, I was blind, but now I see. And so right now, I'm going to invite the worship team to come back up as I close. And so in a moment, I'm going to invite all of you up to the altar. And the altar is, this place right up here, we call it the altar. And it's basically a place where you can respond to God. It's a place where you can pray, worship, weep, whatever the Lord puts on your heart. It's a place where you can get face to face with God. And it's a place where you can experience his love firsthand. If you want more of the presence of God in your life, or you want his love to flow through you, then the altar is the place for you.